Good afternoon, friends. My name is Jonathan Moyer, and I am one of the Associate Directors of Music here at the Church of the Covenant, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our Tuesday noon Organ Plus concert today. It's a pleasure for me to end out this wonderful season of music this year. We've enjoyed so much music in this beautiful space throughout the year, and I'll be playing two concerts, one today, focusing on music from Great Britain, and next week it will focus on the Germanic and French tradition. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome those who can join us via our live stream. We welcome you here with all of us today for this concert, and we hope you will enjoy it as well. Following our concert today, if you have a few moments, please join me in the narthex, and we can enjoy, again, some freshly prepared baked goods by one of our volunteers here at the church. If this is your first time here, or you need to update your email address, or you're online and you'd like to learn more about events here at the church, please consider joining our email newsletter. You can fill out a visitor survey that we have in the narthex, or you can email us at music@covenantweb.org, and you can learn all about the events here that take place on a regular basis. We will take a pause following next week's concert over the summer for our organ series, but we will resume again in September. But there are carillon concerts that continue throughout the summer on Fridays. So if you need more music here at noon on a beautiful day in Cleveland, come on out and hear the amazing carillon that resides in our tower here. In fact, our carillonists at the moment are at a congress for carillonists I think it's the National Congress, in which they all get together and play wonderful carillons. I think it's at Yale University this year. I'd like to offer you a few words about the program today. I've brought together 6 composers that represent just the amazing evolution of the organ on the island of Britain. There is, of course, as we know, such a magnificent tradition of music that comes from that amazing place. But there are some very unique attributes about British music, and it's represented by the music you'll hear today. I will begin on the Newberry organ in the back, and I will be playing music there that's largely from the 18th century and before. And this really defines a very interesting period in keyboard music in England to begin with. The first 2 composers, Arthur Phillips and Giles Farnaby, represent a period that is before the British Civil War, which took place in the mid-17th century. And this was a truly kind of historical marking point in British history. I mean, right after there was also a tremendous fire in London, so there were just enormous changes that took place during this period. And in fact, during the Civil War and the period just right before it, most of the organs in England were destroyed. In fact, there are only remnants, a few pipes and a few cases that exist from before that Civil War. And so we don't know a lot about the organs, the way they sounded, the way they looked, only basically through iconography and historical reports, because no extant instruments survive from the period. But we have lots of music. And that tells us a little bit about the tradition of keyboard music that existed before the English Civil War. And it's kind of interestingly represented by these 2 composers. The middle composer here, Giles Farnaby, is the oldest of the group. And he was from this school of we call the English Virginalists. And it's kind of a category of keyboard music from this period. Not only did they play on their organs, but they played a lot of this music on stringed instruments as well. Harpsichords and what they call virginals, or clavichords, and all kinds of interesting instruments. In fact, Henry VIII was known for having a vast collection of varied kinds of instruments, and he, of course, employed lots of musicians to play for him. And so we have lots of very interesting pieces that are unique to Britain that kind of come out of this tradition. And this piece by Giles Farnaby, who was actually known more as a cabinet maker than an organist, but was a highly respected organist from this period, is called Loth to Depart. Kind of a fanciful title, but that it doesn't necessarily describe the actual music that's taking place, because what this is, it's a set of variations on a beautiful harmony. You'll hear this kind of harmonic ground that begins, or an ostinato, or repeated pattern in which all of these kind of fanciful variations take place. And this idea was a very popular type of composition from this period. And so the first piece you're going to hear is referred to as a ground, but has nothing to do with the floor. It has everything to do with the idea of this repeated musical phrase on which there are lots of variations that take place. In fact, you'll hear it at the very beginning. It's a very simple 5-note melody. It just goes up the scale and drops down alone. And then on top of it, builds this immense kind of tapestry of counterpoint and virtuosity. Now, one thing that is unique from this period, largely British organs did not have pedal divisions. So the British organists for a long time, they had nothing to do with their feet, unlike the kind of the Germanic and French organists that were on that, and the Dutch organists as well. So it was kind of just a unique attributes of the organs. They just weren't that very interested in it. I sneak in the pedal just a little bit at the end of the ground because I can't help myself. It'll just build the crescendo even more. But it's kind of a unique aspect of this. The third piece in this group is a voluntary. Again, another unique term that is used pretty much exclusively in the British tradition. But this comes from the period after the Civil War. And so, again, all these organs were destroyed. A lot of organ builders even moved out of Britain and to France and to other places, and then they came back to a more stable environment, and they brought all the ideas of continental Europe. And so there were a lot of new organs built throughout England in the late 17th century and in the early 18th century that had all of these wonderful new stops, trumpets and cornets and all kinds of colorful divisions, and they got bigger and bigger. They even came up with the idea of an expressive division or a swell division. This was a British idea. But they didn't add the pedal yet. So largely, the British were not that interested in using their feet at the organ. John Stanley was a blind organist and a very dear friend of George Friedrich Handel, who kind of dominated the musical scene during the early 18th century. And we have lots of voluntaries. And this is kind of a general term for a piece of music. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. Some are slow and sad, some are fast and happy, and there's everything in between. This particular piece is divided in 2 parts. It starts out with a nice Adagio in A major, and then a very kind of vivacious Allegro that follows, featuring the cornet stop, but not the pedal. Following those 3 pieces, I'm going to come to the front and then give you some pieces that come from the 19th century and into the 20th century. And again, this represents another remarkable change in the evolution of the organ in Britain. The first piece is a Larghetto. It's in the kind of the style of this variation form that was so popular before, but by a very interesting composer, Samuel Sebastian Wesley. Now, you might recognize that name, Wesley. And he comes from this remarkable family of Wesleys. He's the grandson. So his grandfather was Charles Wesley, the famous hymn writer and one of the founders of modern Methodism. And so Samuel Sebastian Wesley was also the son of an organist, Samuel Wesley, a very famous organist in the city of London. But Samuel Sebastian was the most virtuosic and the most kind of famous within the family. And we have a number of very interesting pieces, and he began really cultivating the use of the feet. And we see this development taking place in the organs of the 19th century in England. They are building pedal divisions so that they can incorporate the feet, because more organists were traveling to the continent and learning about these instruments. Following that, we have a large Fantasia, by a more later 18th or 19th century composer, Charles Hubert Hastings Parry, who is more known for his choral music and his very famous hymn tune, Jerusalem. You can find it in our hymnal. It'd be just a wonderful melodist. He was also a professor at the Royal College of Music. And he wrote these large fantasias, all right? They're kind of exploration of hymn melodies. And this is inspired out of a tradition that actually comes from Germany. And he takes particularly this Genevan tune, Old Hundredth, which we commonly sing in many churches today to the doxology. And you can again find it in our hymnal. If you look up the hymn tune, Old Hundredth, you'll probably recognize it. But we don't really hear the tune just as we'd sing it in the hymnal. He takes it all apart. He takes elements of the tune and he kind of fantasizes on them. Sometimes it's hidden in inner voices, sometimes it's very fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's in the pedal, and he builds this vast romantic symphonic tapestry of sound. And I find it interesting, he calls it a chorale fantasia. And it's not a chorale because it comes out of the Genevan tradition, but this idea of the fantasia brings us towards a more kind of central influence that is taking place behind the scene here in the 19th century in England. And this is the influence of Johann Sebastian Bach. And the music of Bach is what spurred on this remarkable change in England. In fact, Samuel Sebastian, Sebastian was a dedication to Johann Sebastian Bach and the cultivation of the art of organ playing that comes to England largely through the concerts and visits of Felix Mendelssohn, who was on tour and was playing all these works of Johann Sebastian Bach, and the British organists were astounded. What is this music? They wanted to learn it, the organs got bigger, and their technique and their compositions blossomed ultimately as a result of playing the music of Bach. I'll end the program with a kind of piece that's kind of unique again to the British tradition, a tuba tune by Norman Cocker, who was the organist of Manchester Cathedral. Well, what is a tuba tune? It has nothing to do with the orchestral tuba. In the large British cathedral organs, there are these very high-pressured reeds known as tubas. It's similar to a trumpet, but it's very round and full. This organ used to have one, but we actually don't have a tuba, but I'm going to use one of the really fantastic trumpets, and it will give the kind of same effect. And this is just a remarkable testament not only to the compositions of Britain, but their great sense of melody. They know how to write great tunes, and that's what we're going to end our program with today. So I hope you enjoy this kind of journey with me through organ history in England as we present these 6 composers. Thank you very much. tune I have to play today. It's a special occasion, and I need all of you to sing along. It's someone, a very special person in our midst, has a birthday today. His name is Bruce. So let's all sing happy birthday, along with the tuba.